Welcome back to our Scala to Spark class, and today we will talk about a little bit about logging, something we'll eventually have to encounter ourselves, do ourselves, and it's time to go about configuring our logging. And it's also important, of course, because Log4J is used everywhere. This is a primary API, primary library used for logging in a Java virtual machine world, and so Scala is no exception. Again, pretty much every library, every project is using this library. And about 6 months ago, there was some unfortunate news. It turns out there was a big security hole, and so an attacker, if they control the configuration file, they could construct an arbitrary basically could execute arbitrary code on your machine. Again, so that's something not a good thing, right, to say the least. But the good news is we'll talk about the version, right? They have been fixes already provided, and since we are using a newer version of Spark, it includes a newer version of this Log4j library. So let's see how can we go. How do we check? Well, the easiest way we can do it, there's some other ways of doing it, but we can check our external libraries, right, and see that Log4j, but Log4j is somewhere here under Apache logging 217. Okay, 217, that's good. Or is it good? Well, let's see. So, if you were using Java 6, well, no, thank God we're not using Java 6, we're not using Java 7, we're using Java 11, Corretto 11, that's Java 11. So, 217 looks like we are in good shape. We have 217.2. Okay, great. There's actually, in fact, 218 already came out like a couple weeks ago, but we are not going to upgrade yet. If it looks like we are good in this regard. Again, so this logging library is used by pretty much every project. And again, what's logging? Logging is basically printing in a very in a structured format, printing output to a console, to some sort of stream, to a console, which is our screen, or a file, or maybe some network connection somewhere. Again, it's used for debugging, for storing data. I mean, you could say that most of our modern IT infrastructure runs on logs, right? There's special tools to analyze logs, in fact. I mean, so what are logs? They're just text files or text streams, strings basically. So let's see how do we set up. And again, it's quite tricky. Because with different versions. So what we have to do, as we noticed in our yesterday's Spark session, that it generates quite a bit of code, right, on our output on our console. So how do we limit this? There are a couple of ways, right? But so one way is we could do it manually, like this. Spark, we have a Spark context, and we could set a level where the logging should be done. So again, what is this level? So syslog levels, right? It's in maybe Wikipedia, right? This is basically a standard for, I don't know, since 1980s, right? Everybody used it. Used to be lots of levels, but this is basically the main levels. In fact, you use usually error, warning, info, and debug. So error, sometimes use error, warning, error, right? Notice, but there are four most common ones are error, warning, informational, or debug, info or debug. So this tells you exactly how important the level of the message is on pretty much any library, any software package which use syslog. It will utilize levels, meaning, okay, you say debug is just for us, developers, right? Just something for us when developers. Info is something maybe end users might want to see, but again, nothing crucial. A warning is when something is potentially dangerous. I mean, it's not a critical error, but something could go wrong. Maybe something is going to be depreciated in the future. So some sort of warning condition. Error, of course, is when you have some error in your program, something didn't go right. Again, so warnings and errors are quite important. Usually you log those to a file. So, for example, a client receives your program, they run it, and something doesn't go quite right, so you ask them to send the log file so you can analyze it. And usually there's an option to change this warning level to maybe debug, and you see more debug information. So it's just like print line, which we've been using all the time, right? Except we are logging it, right? So let's see what do we need to do to set up. So Spark includes this, but let's start with a simpler example. Again, I have already set up in our project. I started a new file in our main resources. We'll see about that. Scala Logging, right? And this is very simple logger. Simple, basically using the built-in this logger. We didn't import it. We imported it as came with Spark, but again we could also import it separately. So logger, right? And this comes from Java examples, so it's not quite a clean Scala code, but still gets the point across. So we start our log object. We get a log object, right? And then we have opportunity to have these 4 levels of messages. So how does it work? Well, I'll show you in action, and then you can see what happens. Let's see. Let's run it. Okay, so first of all, we saw quite a bit of messages here. So our program is extremely small. So what happened is that when we are getting this logger, right? This is when all these messages came out on our console, right? These were just for our use. There's possibly you could also turn them off, right? Tells you, look at this, all this logging infrastructure is quite extensive. That's why, of course, if you don't need it, you can use just print line. Of course, it's much simpler, right? But still, once you set up for a serious application, it will be, you know, quite nice. So we see some things like where it's written, and let's check it out. This app log, right? So notice this. So that's your log file, right? The bug info warning error, right? So there are a couple of things we need to take a look at here. So first of all, what the heck is this here, right? So we need to assign our logger a good practice. It's a good practice considered a good practice to assign a class name to particular logger, right? Since we are logging within confines from this class day 18 logging object, right? So the thing is getting class name, right? Well, this is a method in Scala and also from Java where we are getting a name of this class, but of course object is not a class, so we made an empty companion, well, class basically to get a name, right? Basically, right? So it is actually day 18 logging, but again not really that it's just considered a good practice. You could put any string. I mean, you could put any string in here. You can't put null string. You have to put in something. You see, so get logger, right? You need, but this needs a string. It needs to be a string, right? And usually in Java world they put in the class name here. Okay, that's why I had to put this empty class, right? It's kind of silly, but it's okay, right? You could have used the name, right? So. What else? So yeah, and of course these are the 4 levels. But now the tricky part is how do we configure this, right? So how do we get this stuff? Where is this app file? Well, the app file is here, right? I made map logs and I made an app log file. But how? So I had to create a logs directory. However, let's see. Okay, let me delete it. Let me delete it completely. Delete it. Or should delete? Let's see what happened. Will we have an error? I think we can delete it. Let's see. Can we delete it? Yeah. Yes. Okay, app is gone. So let's run it again. See if there will be an error. Okay. Notice. A logging library. It's smart enough to create this logs directory and create an app log file. So let's open it up, and yeah, we have 4 messages. Okay, let's run it again, and let's run it again. Oh yeah, I'm running this here. Yeah, so I have 4 more messages. Again, you have timestamp, debug, and what in the world is the CGV? Well, on day 18 logging. So that's my. So why is this here? Because I assigned. Notice here in the upper part here, right? I got this. This is what I got. Com GitHub val RCS day 18 logging, right? This is what I printed. That's what I printed. So as you can see here, the CGV is com GitHub val RCS, right? It's just using a shortened syntax. Again, why does log syslog does this functionality? Why does this library do it? Because, well, for namespace. So you can't, maybe you're using some other library, maybe you're logging something else. in a bigger project, you could have potentially multiple different objects logging, right? So you would need to somehow distinguish between these objects. You know how to know the difference. So that's why it's using this CGV automatically adds this prefix. Because why? Because we are in this project, right? CGV. So when you get print class of this, you get this name, right? So that's just shortened name. Okay. And notice also something here. I also got these messages on my screen. So I got them on my file, right? And I got them on my screen. You don't have to get them both. You can get them only one place, right? You could have them somewhere else. So what? Oops. What else? How do we configure? So that's the trickiest part. It's just finding the right place, and I'll show you. Unfortunately, it has a huge. Where's my configuration? Right. There are multiple ways of configuring, right? So 4% of all code is dedicated to logging, right? So you have thousands of logging statements embedded. So there is a quite complicated way of configuring this logging, right? So you can do a configuration file. That's approach we'll take. You can do it programmatically. You can create a configuration factory. Oh, I don't want to deal with that. You can also do methods on the logger class. That's also a possibility, right? So these are all. It's up to you. You can use your own format. We'll use XML, but you can use JSON. You can use YML. You can use other formats. So that's the first place where it looks. So the question is where it will look. It will look anywhere in your class path. So let's look at the idea of this. So this is a configuration. This is an XML file. You have a configuration, and then you define the type of appenders. Basically, what's appender? That's something which adds data, right, to something, right? And then you have loggers which actually, well, use these appenders, right? So quite complex. And then you have a root, right, which is also which also use these appenders. So relatively complex configuration. I'll show you again. It's a pain, right? So that's why I'll save you some time. I went to this pain. I've gone to this pain a couple times already during my career. The formats change sometimes. So basically, that's the file you'll use. Example. So you have configuration. You need first of all, where does it live? It needs to live in main. You create a new map. Not here where we store our CSV, not where we store our data. It has to live in main under resources. That's considered a good place to put it in, right? There are other places, but again, the main thing is when you run your program, it needs to find it. So this is considered a good place. Notice also little, little marks for resources, like a little icon. So it's a good place. So you make a new map under main, not under Scala, next to Scala, right? So in main, right? So let me show you in Explorer. Where's my Explorer? Right, you see? So we have our project, right? You have go to source, you have resource, main, test. And so you have main, you make a new map resources. And this is where your configuration file lives. So source, main, resources. Again, next to Scala, right? But inside source, right? Inside source, inside source, inside main, source main, right? Again, source main. Inside main, you have resource, right? And inside you have Log4J. Again, if you pull it, you will see the example. If you pull this project, if you update. So let's take a look. So configuration. Again, so remember XML. It's used quite often for different configurations as well. So you have these are arbitrary tags, but of course they are have special meaning to Log4j, right? So XML is extremely flexible, right? And I took this example from this place, this blog. Again, it's not canonical, maybe the ultimate site, but this works well enough, right? I create two different type of appenders. One is the console. This means it will go to target, will be where? System out. You could also do system error, I think also. So system out, this means it will come here. It will come on a screen. And here you can define the pattern, right? What is the pattern? In fact, here's pattern layout, or there's two ways of doing it actually, by the way. Notice here. This is you can say pattern layout and you say pattern attribute, right? Or alternatively, you do pattern layout and you have pattern tag, right, inside. And that's one of those XML peculiarities, right? You have two ways of defining data often. You can have an attribute, right? Or you have a child tag with the content, right? But the result in this case, in Log4j, the result is same, right? So you have the same result. You basically say what you want to see on the screen. Hours, right? A timestamp, right? You can put all kinds of stuff inside. Let's see this app. Yeah, it looks about same, right? Again, no point. You can of course read up on if you want some custom format, but this is good enough, right? If you want a message, right? A message on the number, I believe. What else is there, right? Basically a message. Okay, so we have this is basically formatting, and you have these appenders. You close the appenders tag and you create loggers, right? So you can have multiple loggers, but consider not good practice. So here we use a logger. I just named my name, right? And I don't think I think root might not need to be named, but here, so name again, level. So this is crucial. You say this is the one value you will be changing. So what does it mean? You're saying, okay, I want to show all logs. I want this logger to apply to all logs or messages from logging which apply to debug and higher, right? Debug is remember debug is the lowest level, right? Okay, let's take a look. If I go to info, let's run it. And we have info warning error. But what happened to debug? Let's double check. Indeed, there's no debug. You see this latest one, there's no debug. But why? Because I changed this level. So if I change this to warning, I believe it was now again warn or warning. I forget always. Of course, I think it's warning. Let's try it. If it's maybe warn. Yeah, it's fine. Oh no, info worked. So this is not correct. False warning or maybe warn. Let's take a look. It still works, so this looks like error, so I think I need to put warn. I always forget, I think it's warn. Yeah, so info is gone, you see? So warn, so I'll make this Control D, so debug. So you can remember it. Info, right? Right, so of course I need to close it, right? Close it, and warning, and of course, finally, last but not least, would be error. I don't know. I think it's this, but let's check, right? Let's check. Let's take a look. Okay, so only error. Let's just double check. Yeah, indeed. So the latest one is only an error message, right? So you only have also there's of course I think there's way also to turn it off completely. Well, usually don't want to do this, right? But also of course in this XML you can also say, okay, I don't want to go to console at all, right? Or I don't want to. I could just comment this out, right? I could comment this out or everything, and I will get nothing. I think you could also turn it off somewhere. There's the option. Turned off completely. But one easiest way is to basically, okay, say, okay, I don't want to see anything, right? So you could just basically comment this out, right? And it will only go to file. So this will be the probably least errors onto file. Probably that's something you want to do. So there's no error message here, right? There's all these extra messages from the Log4j setting up itself on a console. And however, in the app, right? Right, there's nothing, right? Let's double check. 24. Let's double check again. I mean, that is, it's here, but it's not here, okay? Or vice versa, right? I could do I could set it up here, right? If I do it here, let's run. I mean, nothing, right? I wonder if it's going to be an error, but probably not. Let's double check. Nope, nothing here. Okay. And if I want back, of course, I could comment this out. Okay, so that's basically one of the approaches for configuring. Again, you can use, there's some other formats. Again, so Log4J, it's using different ways. Again, so that it'll look here, it looks for Log4J, right? Actually, this is like number 9. Actually, there's some other ways of doing, so multiple ways of configuring. Pretty crazy how many ways of configuring it is, because why are there so many ways, you might ask? Okay, well, of course, it seems like it's crazy complexity, but it's because Log4j is used by pretty much every project under the sun, so to say, and then that means that different people use, some people use JSON, some use YAML, some use some other configuration format, and again, so XML is the most commonly used, again, probably most precise, but again, there are other ways of working with it. Okay, so I guess I'll leave in both. I'll leave in error, or maybe just warning, and I'll leave in both with the warning, right? Warn, right? So I'll make one more, Control D, this was info, error, right? Oh, I forget now, right? So we remember, right? So warn, debug info warn error. Let's double check, does it correspond correctly to here? It says warn is not, okay, so warn is actually supposedly not, is depreciated actually, but so error and warn, right? They say these are not to be used anymore, but okay. I mean, of course, it's just a standard, right? So why does it say so? This is like 5 years ago when they decided not to use it, change this, but I don't know. It's better not to use these current messages, current level messages. Okay, so info debug stay, they don't change meaning. Okay, let's run this again. Yes, so I got my warning and I got my error, and I got it here as well, warning and error. Okay, so that's our setup for just a generic, very simple. So you would create in your application, you create your logger, right, and you start logging basically. Very simple, right? And instead of print line, so this is right. So instead of print line, you would use this log method, right? So again, and the main point of this is, first of all, because you can control the formatting of this, right? You can control these levels, right? And again, this is standard for 40 years, so everybody uses it, and then everybody knows how to read these log files. If you have your custom print line, of course, these are just for yourself. So of course this is much more professional, of course, but again, the pain is, of course, is that you need to set it up, right? And there are many libraries, but I think this is quite simple, right? You create a logger, right, comes in and set up. Okay, so now that we have done all this painful work, right, we can congratulate ourselves. Again, this sometimes takes a couple hours to set up correctly, all reading forums and setting up the configuration files. Again, because one of the problems is, of course, for example, I had a previous project which was working. Unfortunately, it was using Log4j, the version 1, so the file name was wrong. So, like I can show you, I had a different run from last summer's project, for example. It was working, but it was using Log4j, and it was using slightly different syntax, right? So, unfortunately, it didn't work, right? So you have to hunt down for these configuration files. Again, the idea is not that complicated. It's just that it's a lot of options. It's extremely configurable. That's the thing. That's why as I say, devil lays in the details here, and it is really detailed. Okay, so now that we have solved this, let's go back to our Spark and see how it works. Will it work? I have created a new file, day 18, right? Spark SQL, and we would like to get our SQL working, right? Let's run this. So what will happen here? So you could do this, right? If you did not have log4j XML setup in source main resources, right? Yeah. Problem with above approach is that it would still spew all the configuration, all the initial configuration, right? Debug info, right? So it's a possibility. If you have some problems with log4j XML, something doesn't work, you could use this type of method, right? Say set log level and of course say warning. You usually want to leave in when you are developing. You might want to do info. Again, it depends how much you trust the Spark engine. Again, I would leave it at the warning level. Again, so you say, okay, we want to put some stuff in if you encounter warnings. Okay, but let's run it. So we just make a session, right, like yesterday, and we get Spark version. Let's run this code. Right, so we're reading CSV. Okay, so again we saw so we got a lot of info. But wait, you're saying, okay, why? We got warning, of course, as well, right? We got a lot of info, right? Well, the problem is now, how come we just set up to, or we check our log4j, we said level warning. Why do we get all this info stuff? Why do we have this debug stuff? Well, look at this here. It turns out that the Spark is not using our logger, right? Because logger was what we're using here. We created logger, right? Right here. Spark use use root, right? There might be some other way of setting it up, but it's using this root, right? And this name doesn't have to match, right? You can put any name would do. Again, I think root might not even need a name, right? I think you can live without a name because it's root, right? So if I take this off, also would work. But the main thing is it has a level attribute, right? So by default, look at this. It wrote all of this stuff onto this poor app log file. Of course, these log files are meant to be pretty big. In fact, there are options to make your log files rotate. In fact, if you go to this website, not here, there is an option to make your files rotate. If you go here, meaning there's an example here. Oh no, I can't find it. Let's see here. Oh, like this. Yeah, Pender, you can check those examples. There is a way of doing rolling, meaning you have a timestamp after, if it's 10 megabytes or more, you create a new time, you archive the old one and you create a new one, right? Again, pretty much standard stuff, right? Right, so you can have up to 7 archives on the same day. Again, if you want to get really heavy, again, you can configure a lot of things here. But so that's also good. But there is so root is used by Spark, not the logger. So root configuration. So by default, it prints to log. It prints to file console. And so what I'll do is I will get this out to, let's say, debug. Let's do debug. Right. Right. Debug. Right. We know how to do this, right? So what will happen? You see, debug is there, but where is info? Info is gone. Okay, that's good. Excellent. How about, so let's do warning, right? Warning. Control C, Control Z. Let's do Control D on warning, right? So I'm showing you, of course, showing you different, you can just uncomment, right? Maybe not the best practice, but it shows for educational purposes, right? So, warning, right? Warn, right? And now let's see. Oh, what happened? Did I not save it? Or did I do something wrong? Or warning? Was it warning or warning? Huh. Oh, this is low. Yeah, that's right. Oh no, everything's fine. Yeah. So all of this was, the bug was from the Log4j itself, but the Spark part, right, is only warning. We have two warnings, right? We have something, there's something wrong with the Spark engines, there's something in the caching, and also there was something, some library, of course, Hadoop library, which is a cloud library for clusters, was not loaded, right? So these are just two warnings, right? Otherwise, everything was clean. The last thing is, I wonder if there's a way to set up this logging. This part also is not, I mean, it's really not needed. We don't really need to see this. Okay, how about this? What happens if I do this, right? If I just console shut off completely. Let's try this. Yeah, so I don't see anything, right? Nothing from the bugger, right? This is just a, well, nothing from the official Spark bugger. This actually came from the, looks like there was some operation which is not part of Spark, something caching here. So that's still present here. However, the app, right? Let's take a look. This came out just now, right? So warning, debug, right? This was way before, so now just warning. So these are only this part here, unable to load Hadoop library. So if I save this, right, delete, right, Control S, right, and yeah, so it works. You could still turn down some warnings, but we'll leave it in with. I would say I'll leave the warnings in, right, and I'll leave logging into file, just the level of warning again. You could leave to errors as well. So it looks like this is also somewhere handled by something else, right? By some other logging called by something else. So there you need to maybe even do more work on this configuration. But okay, but at least it gives you a general idea how logging works, and we can at least now, we should not see too much of, we shouldn't see too much of Spark's extra, info messages unless we really need to see them. Okay, so now let's get to our SQL, right? And let's go back to our book. Remember how we read our data, right? We need to get the data, right? Right, and the idea is this: we need to read it. Remember what we did yesterday. So we'll read the data right here. And I'll copy it from yesterday's code because I'm lazy, of course. And where's our Scala? Here we go, right? Right. Let's do this. Yeah, Spark, no. Okay, looks good. Let's run it. And it shut down automatically, so of course Spark stop, right? So yes, so Spark, now we finally start actually getting any work done, and hopefully we'll get an answer soon, I hope. Right, so that's all. So that's, we've got all this extra work, and we got one actually row of data, one answer. We have 256 rows of data, right? So it again, we saw how we can do actions on this, what is this, data frame, right? This is data frame, right? Yes, which is a data set of rows, basically, right? And you could think of it as an array of rows. But one can do, maybe we can do SQL. We can create a view, right? So we can create something like this. We can create a temporary view. So what does it do, right? So SQL way, right? Flight data. So we basically say, okay, create a view. So now we can use SQL syntax. So if you want to use SQL syntax, if we want to use SQL syntax on our data frames, we create an SQL view like this, right? So this is basically a method, right? Local temporary view. So while it's running, so you can read about instructions. Lifetime is tied to Spark session. So while this Spark session is running, right, This is Spark session. You can call it session or S session or SS. I don't know what you want to call it, right? So flight session. So what this means now we can use SQL. So of course this is provided by Spark, so we can use this, right? Like this, group by destination name, right? For example, we can count the best countries. We can group by, so we know we know aggregate by destination country name. We can do count one, how many, maybe we can order by as well, I think you can do. So like this, yeah. Or so there's two ways of doing it. So notice this, there is SQL way, right? So if you like SQL, I think in my experience students like, who are very comfortable with SQL, use this, but you can also use this SQL way. This will be a data frame, right? Yeah, data frame, right? And also this is a data frame way, right? So so the only requirements, so notice, okay, this is actually depreciated. Oh, okay. Why is it not? It used to be possible. Maybe it's not there anymore. So let's try it. Flight data. Ah, yeah, group by. And one column, right? So what's the name of the column? I believe it was called, where's our flight data? Where's our flight data? Here we go. It's called destination country. Yeah, okay. This is the error. They made an error here. This is error by the book error. This is a book error, right? Because why is it an error? Because they were just sloppy here, right? It has to be quotes, right? Quotes, right? So we'll fix that. We will fix that. Yeah, and then right, count, right? So but let's see, we're getting country. Oh yeah, uncount. Yeah, uncount. Okay, uncount. And this is what? Yeah, data frame. Okay, so let's see, are there any different? So we counted, so two different ways. Yeah. This is the other approach. So again, as we go through our Spark assignments, we'll see how these are extremely similar similar operations. Basically, they do the same thing. Okay, I think it's time we can wrap this up. And let's see. So SQL way, I think it was show, right? The show, yeah, show. I think it is show. Yeah, show will print it, right? We can show, maybe show 10. Let's see. We'll just print first 10. So data frame way, this is the same way. Show 10. Let's see. We should get very similar results, if not same. Let's see. Again, all the setup from the logging setup is this, all this extra stuff to set up logging. Now our Spark starts. Yeah, looks like exactly the same, right? Yeah, Anguilla, exactly the same. Russia and so on. Only one flight from US to Russia. Interesting, right? So we counted. Could we actually sort, right? We have group by, right? Aggregation, right? Aggregation. Could we do, maybe you can sort, right? Descending. That's possible, right? See if we can do this order by descending, right? Maybe that's something to do. So basically we picked up, we group by country, and they're all one, right? Well, only US, right? Only US, I think it appears more than once, right? Destination country. Well, it makes completely perfect sense. All the countries will be one. It's kind of silly thing, right? What do we have in our data? What would be your exercise, right? We can do count, right? We could, of course, group by. So we group by destination, United States, right? Would be the first place. Like everything else is just ones, right? Okay, so see if you can order by get. Don't have too much very interesting data. So get from 2014. Yes, of course, very simple. So so your task will be to do open up flight data from 2014. Right, it's easy. And then use create SQL view. Right, you need to create SQL view of course, right? On show let's see if you can do SQL group by countries, and we want to maybe sort, well, just basically don't even group, just sort by most flights, sort by most, order by flight counts, show top 10 flights, right? So something very similar. Create SQL view, order by flight counts, and show top 10 flights, right? Again, if you want, you can also show the data frame way as well, right? But that might be, but we have not looked at that in detail, right? Sorting, we have not looked in detail on that. We looked at this, I think, yesterday. Did we look at sorting? We took something here, count, so we did, yeah, we did sort, but there was way doing descending, right? That's the only thing, right? So okay, so simple exercise to do. Of course, your main task is, of course, set up logging config XML logging Log4J2 XML config file, right? Set level to warning to both file and console, right? Yeah, for both. Okay, so that's your exercise as well. So I'll see you tonight at 9, and we will continue working more with Spark. Thank you.